The Dallas Cowboys are once again one of the NFL's most disappointing team, with a record that falls really short of the expectations that were set before them. Right now, the Dallas Cowboys do not look like they are on pace to be making the playoffs, and with Dak Prescott being injured in a contract year, it looks like the conditions may exist for the Cowboys to blow it all up, reboot, and start anew. Meaning a new coach, a new quarterback, and potentially a few more losing seasons for the Dallas Cowboys. And while I know there are going to be many fans out there who are excited and joyful at the prospect of the Dallas Cowboys coming back down to reality, and for pundits to finally bring the expectations of the Cowboys back down to reality, the fact of the matter is, it does not seem like all of that will happen. But one thing I can assure you is this: there is one person that will definitely be gone come season's end if the Cowboys don't make the playoffs. And as surprising as it may be, I don't think it's Dak Prescott. No. It is indeed Mike McCarthy. In this video, we are going to take a look at Mike McCarthy, why things haven't worked in Dallas, why he's probably not going to be staying in Dallas, what could be next for one of the NFL's most confusing head coaching figures. All of that much more coming up in this video. Be sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I'm Omer Q for Real Take Sports. Let's dive right in. So Mike McCarthy, a Pittsburgh native, began his coaching journey in the NFL world as a quality control coach for the Kansas City Chiefs in the 1990s. He would very quickly rise in the ranks, becoming the quarterbacks coach for the Chiefs, later moving on to the Green Bay Packers in 1999, where he developed a close relationship with then head coach Mike Holmgren. Holmgren at this point had already taken the Green Bay Packers to the playoffs, and with Brett Favre at quarterback, you could argue that they didn't really have the need for a quarterback coach, and Favre at this point was coming off of some amazing seasons. Favre had become one of the first players in NFL history to win 3 consecutive NFL MVPs from 1995 through 1997, and after an 11-5 year in 1998, bringing in Mike McCarthy might have been just what they needed in order to get Favre back to that level. But that didn't happen. Favre not only did not improve on his 23 interceptions from 1998, his touchdown to interception ratio actually decreased, and Favre ended up throwing less touchdowns than interceptions that year. That eventually led to Mike McCarthy leaving Green Bay, and McCarthy would then go on to bounce around from the New Orleans Saints to the San Francisco 49ers, serving as a quarterback coach, and then of course as the offensive coordinator to one of the NFL's most underwhelming offenses in 2005. But at the same time, the Green Bay Packers were looking for their next head coach, and 2006 presented opportunities for both the Packers and of course Mike McCarthy. McCarthy, of course, was looking to cement himself as a head coach. This had been something that he had wanted even going back to the Mike Holmgren era. But at this point, Holmgren was long gone, and the Packers needed their next guy, and they needed someone who was going to be able to take advantage of Brett Favre being in the final few years of his career. And at this point, they thought the best option was to bring in Mike McCarthy, and that's what they did. And as dubious as that decision may seem in hindsight, the NFL was a much different place in 2006 than it is today, because quite frankly, sometimes it's just about the vibes. It's not really about the offense. So wait, maybe it's not that different than it is today, because it seems like everyone who gets a cup of coffee with Sean McVay or one of these other young head coaches seems to be getting a job. So, hey, Sean McVay, call me back. Anyway, but regardless, McCarthy became the head coach of the Green Bay Packers as a way for them to reunite him with someone he had worked with previously in Brett Favre, who he seemed to have built a decent relationship with. And then the key was to win now. As Bob Harlan, president of the Packers in 2006, said, quote, "We felt strongly that Mike was the right fit for this football team. He is someone who can bring discipline, energy, and creativity to our offense, and most importantly, someone who has a great mind for developing quarterbacks." Ted Thompson, Packers general manager, said that McCarthy's, quote, "attention to detail and emphasis on fundamentals," quote, impressed him in the interview process. He noted that McCarthy's experience and vision for dynamic offenses were critical in their decision making, saying, "Mike has a plan for the Packers and we believe in his ability to lead this team." So at this point, McCarthy was the guy, and the Packers had made everyone aware that they believed that he was going to help lead them to the promised land. That did not happen in his first year as head coach, where the Packers went 8-8, failed to make the playoffs, and failed to capitalize on one of their final 2 years with Brett Favre. However, in 2007, that is when McCarthy really made his stamp on the game, when he helped elevate the Packers and their offense to new heights, making them finish all the way to the NFC Championship game that ended in a poetic Brett Favre interception that also ended Favre's time with the team. And going into 2008, it was a real test for McCarthy because he didn't have Brett Favre. He didn't have the Pro Bowl MVP quarterback that could help get him out of trouble. It was all on McCarthy to evolve the quarterback of the future that they had drafted a couple years before that, Aaron Rodgers. And if Aaron Rodgers had failed, then that would mean Mike McCarthy and his time with the Packers likely was also over. And after finishing 6-10 in 2008 in Rodgers' first season, they would improve drastically in 2009, making the playoffs. Aaron Rodgers had cemented himself as one of the rising stars in the NFL. And in 2010, it all came together. The Packers would go on a magical run as a wild card team to not only make the Super Bowl, but win it in convincing fashion, which cemented Rodgers as a perennial MVP candidate and McCarthy ranking as one of the best head coaches in all of football. And for a couple of years there, McCarthy and Rodgers would go on to go to NFC title game after NFC title game after NFC title game. And they could never get back to the height of 2010, but they were still two of the best quarterback and coach combinations that the NFL had at that point. And then eventually in 2018, the Packers would actually move on from McCarthy and choose to fire him and hire instead Matt LaFleur as their next head coach. And this was primarily due to three reasons. Number one, by 2018, the Packers were underperforming with a 4-7-1 record, putting them out of playoff contention. And this culminated in a declining performance for the team overall and multiple years of missed playoffs. This was all despite Rodgers being a top quarterback. It just seemed like the rest of the team and the rest of the energy around the team could not keep up in the competitive space that was the NFL. Number two, there was reported tension between Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy. The relationship had become strained in the later years of McCarthy's tenure as Rodgers grew frustrated with the offensive system, which he felt was overly rigid and lacked innovation. Some reports even indicated that Rodgers often changed McCarthy's play calls at the line of scrimmage, reflecting a lack of cohesion and trust. Analysts and insiders speculated that the tension was affecting the team's performance and morale as well. And that lack of innovation was actually something that McCarthy seemed to have taken to heart, because this was something you heard commonly among both the players that he formerly played with and coached, but also the pundits that analyzed and broke down McCarthy's tenure with the Packers. After being fired by the Packers, McCarthy would go on to step out of the limelight in the NFL and take a year off. And in that year, he reportedly had been preparing for his return to coaching by stepping up and innovating his game. There was even this now infamous segment on ESPN that aired, which really took a look into the life of Mike McCarthy. He had gone from being a coach who was very rigid in his ways to someone who took a step back to study football, to study the game, to look into things that mattered and how the game was changing, and promised by doing this for a year, by watching every single game, every single play, breaking it down, he would be able to crack the code to find the perfect NFL offense and would be able to bring that to his team. And that was the promise, and that is what was sold in that video package that ESPN ran, and it seemed to work for one team, because the Dallas Cowboys, after a couple of very mid years under Jason Garrett, would hire Mike McCarthy as their next head coach, with Jerry Jones putting high expectations on that hire immediately. And remember this, when you are the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, you not only get all of the love and the joy that fans give you when you win, but you also get all of the criticism. And immediately, there were many people, myself included, who looked at this hire and thought it was a little strange, because they had a guy in Dak Prescott who had all of the potential in the world. At this point, they also had Ezekiel Elliott, and their defense was one of the best in the NFL. But they decided to go after a arguably out-of-touch head coach who, again, in one segment, ESPN said that he admitted to his mistakes, but also one that we can all agree on was never really the most honest, even if you ask some of his own older players. Regardless, McCarthy was hired. After a disappointing 2020 season at going 6-10, the Cowboys would then go on to make the playoffs each of the next 3 years with a 12-5 record, becoming one of the NFL's best offenses, primarily in 2021, when they went on to finish first in the NFC East. But then we got a continuation of something that had been a staple for the Cowboys, that being boneheaded playoff losses that made their fans absolutely lose their minds. And remember, Mike McCarthy was brought in as a guy who was supposed to help elevate this team not only to the Super Bowl, but at least an NFC title game. Yet he has been unable to do that throughout his tenure. Those are the expectations that are put on this team. That is why they gave Dak Prescott an insane big money contract. That is why they have paid the likes of CeeDee Lamb. That is why they have paid the likes of Micah Parsons. That is why we are here. That is why Dallas Cowboy fans pay money, and a lot of it, in order to watch their team. Regardless of that, though, Mike McCarthy has been unable to pull his team to that next level. This is a team that has not made an NFC Championship game. And the innovative and new offense that Mike McCarthy had promised outside of one spectacular year in 2021 has failed to materialize. In 2021, they were the best offense in the NFL, largely behind an insane year by Dak Prescott. However, as soon as McCarthy took over the reins in 2023, even though the Cowboys' record was good, their offense actually took a bit of a step back compared especially to that 2021 NFL season. And if you're looking around, scratching your head, thinking about why that might be the case, well, here's why. Over the last couple of years, there have been reports that Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy may have misled the team's ownership during the hiring process back in 2020. McCarthy even admitted during an interview that during his initial discussions with the Cowboys owner Jerry Jones and stun Stephen Jones, he claimed to have thoroughly studied the team's roster and game footage to prepare for the job. Later, McCarthy would go on to admit that he hadn't actually done any extensive review, explaining that he had just said all of that to help secure the job. So that whole thing of Mike McCarthy sitting in this insane barn, watching every single snap of every single team, learning these offenses, learning what makes them tick, and innovating his style and approach was all bullshit and hadn't actually happened. In any other world, that would probably be fraud, yet it is the NFL where perception is king, and that's how a lot of these guys end up getting hired. But this honestly should have been the death nail in McCarthy's time with the team, because The Cowboys were paying this man tens of millions of dollars in order to get to that next level, and he hadn't done that. Come to find out, the entire reason that probably didn't happen is because McCarthy lied to the team in the first place about what he could bring to the table. They basically bought this guy who scammed them out of their money and their time, and probably could have gotten another head coaching option in the 2020 offseason that would have been better. So, insanity, if you ask me. Compound all of that with the fact that the Cowboys currently seem to be out of the playoff running. Their quarterback, Dak Prescott, is out for a number of months, potentially the entire year, depending on the way the season turns out. I think it is do or die time for the Cowboys as far as Mike McCarthy goes. And I want to be clear, I am not one of those people who's going to sit here and be remorseful if Mike McCarthy loses his job. He has made tens of millions of dollars throughout his career. I feel bad if someone making $50K at a concession stand in AT&T Stadium loses their job. I ain't feeling bad for Mike McCarthy. So miss me with any of that. This man should be fired. This man should be relegated to being an offensive coordinator. Yet you know damn well there is going to be someone who is going to give him a chance, because the NFL is a system that keeps on giving and rewarding horrible head coaches until the fact is no longer deniable. Even though it should be, I promise you this, when Mike McCarthy gets fired by Jerry Jones, he will be hired back by another team, and they will give him a boatload of money to underperform for 2 years before he fizzles out and then goes on into obscurity to become an analyst, breaking down game film and talking about things that I probably know more about at this point. So that's where we are. That's where we stand. That's probably what's going to happen, and that's the real take truth. Let me know in the comment section, though. What do you guys think the Dallas Cowboys should do? Should they fire Mike McCarthy? Should they keep him around? Should they hire me as their head coach? I wouldn't even accept it, honestly. Yes, I would, actually. I've watched every single game film of the Cowboys over the past 5 years, Jerry. Give me a call. Hit me up. YouTube.com/RealTakeSports. Guys, let me know in the comments. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Until next time, I'm Omer Q for Real Take Sports. Be happy, be healthy, and as always, keep it real.